how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I am your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then we talk about it. And today we are talking about Agatha All Along. The premise on IMDb states, a spellbound Agatha Harkness regains freedom thanks to a teen's help. Intrigued by his plea, she embarks on the Witch's Road trials to reclaim her powers and discover the teen's motivations. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what the show is, so no notes on that. If it is your first time here, I go through the plot beat by beat. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. So we start off... By the way, I haven't rewatched Wandavision going into this, so I'm going in just straight off the dome, I guess you would say. So we start with Agatha in a car, and she's humming a tune, and she's dressed up as a cop for some reason. And she heads over to a crime scene. We see her neighbor from Wandavision. He is on the scene. The vibes are very much like Mayor of Easttown, if you've seen that show. But if not, it's just like a crime show. They're busting each other's balls about like, oh, shouldn't you not be smoking? Like, shouldn't you, not be eating donuts? Like that kind of vibe. But apparently she got a call from the police chief because she was supposed to be on probation. But apparently this is a case only she can solve. So they head over to the deceased, and as they're talking, turns out that the deceased has been crushed by something big and heavy and apparently did not die here. It's like, oh, is she dead? And her neighbor's like, most certainly. And then she winks like, you never know. So clearly they're talking about Wanda. How Agatha would know about this is unclear. If magic would just kind of told her. I mean, we know some things about magic in the MCU, but it's not clear how she would know this. But it's just a small thing I picked up. We see Agatha uncomfortable at the tarp over the dead body. She notices that the fingers are black, just like when she used to use the Darkhold. So again, alluding to it being Wanda. And Agatha finds a brooch in the water, and she picks it up. Her partner's like, yo, did you find anything? And she's like, no, I didn't find anything. He's like, who are you? Like, what happened to you? And you're like, are you alright, Agnes? They don't call her Agatha, they call her Agnes. He's like, you don't seem like you're yourself. She's like, oh, don't worry about it. And this is where the show opens up with like a crime scene opening. And instead of the credits being like, oh, Catherine Hahn playing Agnes, it is their actual names in the show. So it's like Agatha as Agatha, and like this person as themselves. So it wasn't like the actor, it was like the character inside the show being in a show, if that makes sense. And the show, air quotes, that we're watching inside of the show is Agatha of Westview. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll make a lot more sense because I put the clips in there. But Agatha, or Agnes as we're going to keep calling her, because for most of the show they call her Agnes. Agnes goes to the library. She goes up to the librarian because she found one of those cards you get from like renting out a book. And it turns out there are no names on it, but there are dates. And the librarian's like, I can't help you. Everything's on computers now. Like, you're wasting my time. And she goes, oh, okay. Where were you between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m.? And she's like, okay. Like, let me help you out. So she looks up the book. I didn't write down what it was called, but it was some book we've never heard of. And she's like, apparently the book wasn't even checked out. It was stolen 3 years ago. Agnes goes to go find the book because apparently there are other copies. And when she goes to the bookshelf, it turns out that it is completely burnt. And out of nowhere, this guy pops up and he's like, there's a fire. And he's like really creepy. And she was like, was everything destroyed? And he's like, every last copy. But the way that they were talking, it very much felt like they weren't even talking about the book. It was like context for something else, but they were using the book to like get the point across. That was unclear. So everything's a little bit in mystery, and it's like, what the hell is going on? Especially because I don't remember how WandaVision ended. So I was like, where did we leave Agatha? I don't know. But we go back to the crime drama. Agnes goes back to the precinct. The chief is like, hey, we've run the body samples, all the DNA and all that. And it turns out that the soil underneath her fingernails isn't even from the area. And she's like, of course, well, they would have like moved the body. And he's like, no, it's from like Eastern Europe. And again, alluding to the body being Wanda. So this is where Agent Vidal shows up, played by Aubrey Plaza. And she's like, hey, been a long time. And she's like, Agnes is like, you're trying to take over my case. And she's like, no, if you want to be in charge, like, you can be in charge. Vidal's like, is this really how you see yourself? And Agnes seems confused. And it very much feels like Vidal knows what's really going on. And she's like, all right, I'll play along. So she's like, all right, cool. Let's talk to me about this case or whatever. She's like, it seems like the body just magically appeared out of nowhere. And Agnes is like, can we just stick to reality, all right? This is a small town where small town things happen, bad things happen in small towns. So, like, it's nothing crazy. And she's like, oh, yeah, right, you're right, Agnes. You've lived there your whole life, right? And this is where Agnes seems like she's, like, trying to find memories that aren't there. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? She's like, all right, I don't want you here. And she, like, kicks Vidal out of the room. We cut to Agnes going to a pawn shop to show off that little brooch. The guy inspecting it, who was one of the neighbors from WandaVision, he's like, no, this is a real brooch. There are 3 goddesses on it. Each one represents something else. Turns out that it's actually a locket. He opens it up and there's a little piece of hair inside. And it seems like Agnes knows what it is, but, she can't, like, find the memories for it. And, she's like, how much would this cost? And he's like, about $200. And she goes, good, that's how much I'll charge on eBay. And she takes it and she walks out. So we go back to Agnes. Damn, I keep doing that. We go back to Agnes and she's looking at the name of the fake book. And she underlines the first letter of each part of that book. And it ends up spelling The Darkhold, which is the book from WandaVision. As she, like, you can see her, like, brain kind of, like, figuring some things out before it can like come to the forefront of her mind. The chief comes in, he's like, go home, Agnes. And she's like, I am home, chief. And he walks over and turns off the light, like, seriously, no, go home. And so it seems like every time she gets close to breaking free of whatever's going on with her, like, something brings her back in. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? But we press on. So Agnes goes home. She sees a door cracked open. And as she opens the door, it is a kid's room. We see the name Nicholas Cratch, who was her son. I don't know if they said that in WandaVision, just a thing from the comics. So that's her son, and she feels some type of way about it. You can see her on her face. There's a knock at the door, and it turns out Vidal has showed up with pizza. Agnes tells a joke, and she's like, they laugh about it a little bit. And she's like, yeah, I got a lead on the case. And Vidal's like, that's not why I came over. But, all right, tell me about this lead. And Agnes is like, yeah, there's this car crash in Eastview. She's like, you travel outside of Westview? And she's like, yeah, I'm worldly. I travel around. And she's like, okay, where have you been? And Agnes is like, So again, it's one of those moments where she's like looking for the memories that she can't find. All right, clear. Okay, it's not working. Just tell me about this car wreck. And she's like, okay, cool. There's blood in the back seat. Both the airbags in the front were deployed. And so I was like, all right, you think there's 2 perps? And she's like, well, my gut says that it's related to the case, but there's something, like, I have all the pieces, but it's just, like, not, it's not in the right order. And Vidal's like, can I ask you something? She's like, do you even remember why you hate me? And again, Agnes gets confused, and you can see her trying to find it, and she's like, And she's like, you're hiding evidence, aren't you? And she's like, no. And Vidal's like, you're only lying to yourself. And in this moment, we hear a thud, and Agnes goes to go check it out, obviously. But Vidal sits there completely unfazed. So again, it's like Vidal knows what's going on, and so she's not playing too much into whatever this bit is. But Agnes is fully, like, wrapped up in it, and she hasn't found her way out. So Agnes goes upstairs, and there's a burglar. And it seems she's like, hey, are you taking something? And then he leaves out onto the roof. Agnes pursues. And it's one of these funny moments. And I don't know if they did this on purpose, but this might just be a TV thing. And one of my nerdy things that I noticed is that apparently it's like really hard to shoot someone actually, or record someone actually running like full speed. So you can tell that the teen is like lightly jogging. But the way that Agnes is like trying to follow him, it's like, yeah, if this was realistic, she would have never caught up to him at the speed that they're moving. But I digress. So the teen makes it to a fence. He goes to climb it, but there is unfortunately a dog behind it, so he has to hop down. She almost gets him, but he does a spin move on her and gets away. Before he can get too far, he gets hit by a car. And she runs over and she's like, oh my God, are you okay? And the lady comes out and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, you came out of nowhere. And she's like, ma'am, get back in your car. And she's like, good, I'm glad that you're alive. You're under arrest now. So we cut to an interrogation room and she's like, well, it turns out he didn't take anything, but, we gotta question him and see, like, what this kid actually knows. And Vidal's like, all right, go get your perp. Like, again, clearly not playing too much into the bit, but just enough that Agnes is like, why would she say it like that? She goes into the room and she's like, why would you break into the house of a decorated detective? And he's like, a decorated detective? He's like, you mean a detective without pay? And so already snarky, but I kind of like it. And she's like, what are you looking for? And he's like, I was looking for the respect of your peers and a happy home life. Turns out you're out. And she doesn't like that. She kicks over his chair. Doll knocks on the glass and she's like, like, don't do that. And she goes, all right. Picks him back up. She's like, listen, I can be nice or, I can be a little monster. So you tell me which side you want. And he calms down. He has no snarky remarks. And she's like, well, what are you after? And he says the road. And she goes, what road? And he's like, what? Like, you of all people know exactly what I'm talking about. And she, like, almost has something, but she pushes past it. And she was like, I was on the road this morning, and it led to something pretty awful. Where were you between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m.? And he was like, I sleep in my bed. And she does this really, like, snarky thing where she's like, asleep in bed. Total loser. Like, and just making fun of him. And she's like, what do you know about this? And she throws a bunch of, like, photos of the body down on the desk. And he looks at it and he's like, they're just flowers, what the hell? And she's like, what? And she looks down and she sees the pictures have changed and they're all flowers. And she looks over at the glass and Vidal is gone. And he's like, why do you keep looking at that painting? And the glass turns into the painting. And she's like, what the hell's going on? And she turns back to him and he starts speaking in Latin. And she goes, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but you're going to spend the night in, in a jail cell. And it's weird because when she goes to arrest him, it almost seems like he's in a trance, like him doing his little spell or whatever, like pulled him out of whatever he was in with her, because he just seemed for that split second like he just wasn't even paying attention to what she was doing. So that part was like, wait, what? Like, what's going on here? But I'm already wrapped up in a good way. Like, I'm like, tell me what's going on. So Agnes goes to the coroner's office. The body is gone. And Agnes is like, no, like, it was like, she was 5'3", she had, wearing this, she had red hair, and the body just appears out of nowhere. And I'm like, Agnes, are you not realizing, like, what you just conjured your own story, hello? And she says that the hair was scarlet, which was a thing we saw in the beginning of the episode, again, alluding to Wanda Maximoff, and the little book rental sheet is wrapped around her toe, as like the body tag. Again, there was no names on it, but there were dates, and on the last little date, it says Wanda Maximoff appears on October 13th, the day before my birthday, and Vidal appears out of nowhere, and she goes, how did she die? Or no, Agnes asks Vidal, like, how did she die? And Vidal's like, you're asking the wrong question. And she's like, that witch is gone, and all the copies of the Darkhold. She's left you trapped in her spell, but you don't have to stay here, do you? And Agnes is like, is it getting hot in here? She starts taking off her clothes. And Vidal's like, yes, claw your way out of this. And then Agnes starts to go through all of her WandaVision outfits. It's actually really cool, especially when we get to the last one, which is in black and white, but the rest of the shot is in color. And they even did, like, there's this light swinging back and forth that's even working with the black and white CG. It's really cool. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. But I lost my train of thought. Oh, Vidal's like, there are 2 Jane Does in this case. You know her name. What's yours? And she looks down at the little tag again, and above Wanda Maximoff, it says A. Harkness, and Agatha finally takes off her final outfit and breaks herself free and becomes Agatha again. And she awakens in her house butt-ass naked, and she is pissed off. She heads out the house butt-ass naked, And she goes right over to her neighbor from the beginning of the episode, and he's like, Miss Agnes, you're okay? Like, oh my God. And then she's like, stop talking. How long have I been here? And he's like, you don't remember? And she's like, I don't, catch me up, all right? And he's like, about 3 years. And she's like, 3 years? Wanda. And he's like, we try not to say your name around here. And she's like, because you're cowards and you're sheep. And it's like, there's Agatha. Agnes is gone for sure. And she's like, okay, well, like, what have I been doing? And he's like, well, you've been a pretty regular neighbor, except for your boundaries. And she's like, don't say I'm nosy. And he's like, all I'm saying is everything was cool until last couple of days, and you started doing this weird, like, true crime thing, and we all have just been trying to play along and, like, help you out. Some people have even brought over, like, groceries and such. And that's when she looks over and sees that her neighbors are watching. And of course, it's like a family across the street, and they're like, oh my God, put the kid inside. The husband wants to go help, and the wife's like, no, get over here. And the wife was the librarian, and the husband was the police chief. We look over, and we see the jeweler from the pawn shop running over, and he sees like stuff's going down, and he's like, nope. And he turns away and jogs away. And she's like, so this is where hope goes to die, huh? And as she's saying that, Merv tries to put a jacket on her, and she like throws it off. And he's like, well, you seem more conscious now. You seem more, powerful. And she's like, oh, powerful. And she's like, and she walks away. And as she's doing that, he's like, yeah, can you put some clothes? Okay, yeah, okay. So she goes back inside. She tries to do some magic. Nothing happens. And she's like, no, no, no. She goes to the basement. Turns out it is normal. It's not her little, like, dungeon or whatever it was in WandaVision. And she sees that her rabbit is still there, and she's like, I've been mugged. They took everything from me. My magic's gone, and now I just have a regular house. But we got to get back on top. And then she hears a noise upstairs. She goes upstairs to the closet, opens it. Turns out that that's where the teen has been this whole time. And she's like, oh, I guess I didn't actually arrest you. I just kind of kidnapped you. My bad. And before she can do anything, Vidal, whose character is Rio in the show. I don't know. They didn't say that in this first episode, but I remember her being called that. So I'm just going to call her Rio. So Rio shows up and attacks Agatha. She's like, oh, hey, how long has it been? And she goes over and puts a knife to her throat, and Agatha's like holding it back. And she's like, you've used the Darkhold magic to hide yourself from me. But now that the magic's gone and your powers are gone, now you're vulnerable. And she pokes Agatha a little bit with a knife, and she starts to bleed. And the two of them fight each other. But during this fight, we find out that they say that they can't kill each other for some reason, and it's not clear why. And there's a moment where they kind of like break apart, and Agatha's like, listen, you don't want to kill me like this, powerless, like a normal person, right? You want to fight me at full strength. You want to earn, like, your kill. She's like, all right, cool. Well, why don't you take my powers? And then, we'll go from there. And she's like, you can't do that. I can't do that because if I took your powers, it would kill me. And then she's like, just let me get my powers back, and then you can come for me, all right? And she's like, all right, but just don't forget, like, I'm not the only one who wants to kill you. I know, but she's like, I know you love the anticipation of the kill, so, like, you'll wait for it, so don't worry. Like, I'm not worried about it. And she's like, fine, but I'm going to tell the others where to find you. And she's like, okay, but like, who's coming for me specifically? And she's like, oh, the Salem 7. They'll probably be there at sundown. She's like, you're sick. Like, you don't have a heart. And she's like, I do. And it's black. And it beats for you. And then she goes, Te veo. And she walks out and leaves. And Agatha looks back at the teen. And she's like, oh, yeah, you. And that's where the episode ends. So, if it is your first time here, I have a 3-point rating scale. It is 1 and done. Give it a chance, and I'm in. For this first episode, I'm going to give it an I'm in. I think the entire crime, drama, like mystery, I think it would have been boring if it wasn't for the fact that things kept popping up where it seems like, like Vidal and even like Agatha to some point was like trying to pull herself out of the spell. So those were the parts that I was like, what's going on here? Clearly, like, something's, keeping her here, and she's trying to break free, but she doesn't know how to. So I was like really interested in that. And again, I even, pointed out the fact that like when she goes to the coroner's office and the body's not there, and then she like conjures the body up. I'm like, what's going on here? the fact that the world was changing, especially like when she met the teen and he started doing a spell. So he's trying to break her free, and he's talking about this road, and it's like, what's with the road? Agatha should know this. Vidal's trying to, or Rio, whoever you want to call her, is trying to kill Agatha. There's this Salem 7 that wants to kill Agatha. It's been 3 years, so what does Agatha? How does Agatha feel like she lost something in that amount of time? Like, all of these things are set up in the first episode this was a good first episode to just be like, here's a bunch of mystery, and now here's some stuff, and we can lead you forward. And I was like fully, pretty much enthralled in this first episode. So yeah, out of the 3 points, I was definitely an I'm in on this first episode. Now, I have to, well, I want to get into a rant, but also I want to talk about spoilers, because as of recording this, the show is, the first season is finished, so all the episodes are out. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I appreciate your time. Give this a like or rating if you're listening just on podcast services. If you are on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment, give me a like, maybe a show you'd like me to watch next. That would be muy bueno. But I'm going to get into spoilers in 3, 2. So the biggest thing about Agatha, and nothing against the show, I like the show. So I guess that's the first spoilers. I actually very much like the show. This was one of those things like Loki, where I was like, who the fuck is asking for this? And then I watched it and I was like, fuck, this is good. But this is one of those what did I call them in my head? PMDs, perplexing Marvel decisions. Of Marvel does this thing where they're like, let's give you a character that you never asked for, because no one's really asking for it, instead of this major character who you've probably been asking for. So as someone who loves supernatural characters and loves Marvel, I've been waiting for Blade, which they can't seem to get off the ground at all, even though it's just a black man fighting vampires. And I've been waiting for a Ghost Rider of any of them, because there's at least 4 main ones that you could pick. And instead we got Agatha All Along. And it's like, what the actual fuck? Like, this is one of those Eternals or Shang-Chi or Guardians of the Galaxy. And this is me talking like announcements before the movies were made, of like, who asked for this over major characters? Again, like Ghost Rider or Blade, you know what I mean? Like, how did I get Agatha before I got those two? It doesn't make sense. Marvel, why? Why do you hate me specifically? It feels targeted. But let's talk spoilers about the show. Watching this first episode again after finishing the entire season is like super interesting, because she mentions the car crash, which we find out Billy was in like later on in the season. I was like, oh fuck, she's humming the Witch's Road song in the first moment that we see her. And it's like, oh, okay, so this has been planned out for a while now. The fact that like you find out that Vidal Rio is actually Death, when it's like a lot of the conversations they have in this show, especially like, oh, you love to like revel in the kill or whatever, like you love the anticipation of it. It's like, oh yeah, you've been hiding from me, like from Death, for a long time because of the Darkhold. It's like, oh shit, like a lot of things are making sense that you wouldn't know until the end of the show, and that's so fucking cool that everything is like actually planned out like way beforehand. And then when you learn, of course, at the end of the season that like, oh, it was all Billy just like making things up, it's like, okay, that's fucking awesome. But again, the biggest question is like, how did Agatha know that Wanda was dead when she was trapped in Wanda's spell? Like, is that how magic works? You can like she can just sense that Wanda was gone? Question mark? Like, huh? But in terms of like the actual show itself, I like the trial of the week type thing. Granted, not all of the trials worked for me. Like the music episode didn't really work, just because you had that really cool demon and it didn't really do anything other than sit there, and then they sung the song and killed it, and I was like, I kind of wanted you to use magic or whatever. But no, I really liked all the characters in the show. I was really surprised that this didn't end on like a Disney ass note where everyone came back to life and had a happy ending, and like people actually died. Like my favorite character, whose name I'm blanking on right now, the one with her mom, like she died, and I was like, damn. I also, it's really interesting to have a character of Agatha be the main character, because it's like you don't want to like her, but especially with like the Nicholas Scratch stuff, it's like, oh, I kind of get it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a little sympathetic to you, even though I know you're kind of a piece of shit. But I kind of wish, like, the only real problem or like rewrite thing that I would do is I wish that Agatha was killing people in the beginning to have enough power to fight death so that she can save her son, and that when she lost her son, she was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep getting power, like for power's sake. I'm not a fan of like villains always having to now have this narrative of like, oh, they gotta be sympathetic, like some people should just be evil. But I think specifically for this one, I would have liked her to be like, no, I'm getting all this power to try to save you from death, even if that seems impossible. Like, I gotta do something. And I think that would make more sense of her wanting to just steal people's power rather than just killing witches for fun. But I mean, I can ramble on and on. I guess the main important thing is I liked the show, even though I for sure didn't ask for it. I liked all of the characters for real. I'm surprised, or I'm interested in seeing what they do with Billy and his brother Speed, and where will they be introduced next, and how are they going to get the Young Avengers all together. I'm sure they'll just find them or whatever. But I am interested now, because it seems like Marvel's trying to correct the ship of like, okay, well, how are you going to use these characters next? You know what I mean? But yeah, overall, I give this show an I am in. If I had to rate it, I'd for sure watch whatever, comes next from Billy and Agatha. And I didn't like the whole like Agatha comic accurate look. I don't know if it was because she was in like ghost form, or if it was like the hair, but something about it just wasn't working for me, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but it's just not, it ain't hidden the way I want it to. But that's where I'm gonna leave this before I just keep talking. Thank you so much. I will see you next week, and that's all I got. Peace.